Okay, I think we'll start this morning's session. Thank you very much for coming. You're welcome to move forward if you'd like, but we're very happy to have you here. I think other people will probably drift in with a little bit of time. I'm Cheryl Gray. I'm the Director of Independent Evaluation at the Inter-American Development Bank, and I'm very pleased to be invited to chair this session this morning, especially with Rob Vandenberg, who is an old friend, and I'm a great admirer of Rob, so it was a special treat to be asked to chair this session this morning. I don't think Rob probably needs an introduction to this group, but I'll say a few words. He was for 10 years the director of the Independent Office of Evaluation at the GEF until, about a year ago. Before that, he was, 25 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands, in many capacities, in research for quite a while, and in his last 5 years as head of evaluation for the ministry. Rob has done a super job, as far as I can tell, at GEF. I've been interacting with him through our evaluation cooperation group for years. He is trained as a historian, I just learned today, which is good training for all kinds of things, including evaluation. But I can tell you Rob is a superb evaluator and always has a tremendous amount to offer on evaluation. He is now the president of IDEAS. He's taken over the presidency of IDEAS, which is a global network for evaluation, and is also involved, as Rob always is, in a million other things, teaching here and teaching there, and is a professor here and research here. So Rob is not a person who slows down very much, I can tell you. He's got a lot of energy. But we're looking forward to the session today, which is to present they call it the fifth overall performance study of the Global Environment Facility. Very, very large study, done once every, how many years?
5 years.
Every 5 years.
4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years. So I'm very anxious to hear the results from the last one. I actually haven't heard this myself, so I'm looking forward to hearing. I should tell you all, he'll speak for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have questions and answers. It is being recorded and web streamed, so just so you all know, put you on notice, whatever you say, we're recording and it will be web streamed. So. Very good. With no further ado, let me turn it over to Rob.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and talk about this. And indeed, as Cheryl said, I'm no longer involved in the GEF evaluation office. I left in September this year. Juha Vito took over. But the fifth overall performance study was done under my directorship. So they felt that I should also be the one that brings this to you. Although there are many, many capable people in the Global Environment Facility, Independent Evaluation Office who could do this actually. And at the end of the presentation you'll see some further evidence of that. Let me give you some background to these overall performance studies. It's actually part of the governance machinery of the Global Environment Facility. The assembly of the Global Environment Facility, meaning all the member states of the Global Environment Facility, traditionally ask for the Council to ensure that an overall performance study is undertaken, because they use this as an input into decision-making for the next phase of the GEF. So every 4 years, when the replenishment of the GEF takes place, an independent evaluation of the achievements of the GEF is supposed to inform this replenishment. And this started off because in the early phases, there was no independent evaluation system yet in the GEF. So it had to be a separate study that would do this. The first 3 of these, from OPS 1 to OPS 3, had a focus on performance mainly. And OPS 4 and OPS 5, the 2 most recent ones, included a lot of information and evidence on impact. So it's actually gone over time, developed from a performance study into a comprehensive evaluation. So, as I said, the studies were initiated by the Council when the GEF did not yet have an independent evaluation system. But if we look at other organizations, why don't they have similar comprehensive overall performance achievement evaluations It tends to be because they already have an ongoing system of evaluations that report regularly to the board, so there's no need for this kind of an overview evaluation. The Global Environment Facility at a certain moment decided we need to have an independent evaluation system as well. And then the challenge was, how will the two combine? You have these overall performance studies and then an independent evaluation system. So how can we do this? The fourth overall performance study still came on top of what the regular evaluation system was doing in the GEF. But for OPS5, we started mixing this. So we started using the evaluative evidence coming out of the regular work of the office into the overall performance study. And so how will this go on? What will the future look like? This is an interesting question. And why is it comprehensive? Why was there also a need for a comprehensive overview? I personally believe that this had to do with the fact that the GEF very much was set up as an experiment in international cooperation, a network organization that would mobilize existing agencies, so no need to develop a new agency to support countries on internationally agreed upon environmental priorities. And then all kinds of questions come up. Is this experiment successful? Is the GEF successful at the country level or internationally? And the questions start ranging from organizational issues to performance to impact. And the terms of reference, this is also an element that is quite important, I believe. The terms of reference are decided by the Council, and that leads also to a long list of questions, because Council members will say, but I'm particularly interested in this, and another Council member wants to know more about that. So before you know it, you have a long list of questions that goes beyond a well-focused, narrow evaluation. You'll have everything in there. So the list of subjects that the fifth overall performance study dealt with is impressive. I mean, it's a performance at the project level, country level, regionally, globally, private sector involvement, civil society involvement, the role of science and technology, gender, achievements per focal area, and impact as a very important issue, of course. But also institutional issues like governance, mobilization of resources, results-based management. And you can ask, is this too much? Is the system still able to cope with this? And if we go back to the early overall performance studies, from 1 to 3, they tended to be relatively narrow in scope and were incorporated successfully into the replenishment negotiations. There weren't that many recommendations. They could be taken care of. But the fourth overall performance study already produced many sub-studies and recommendations that could not be taken on board because there were simply too many. And in the fifth overall performance study, we also had a mountain of evaluative evidence. So we developed two instruments to make sure that the mountain of evidence would remain available. First of all, a management response, where management would actually say, okay, we're going to tackle these and these issues in this way, and it's going to be used over time. And secondly, we made sure that we had a publication of technical documents that could be used in further work. And this is already happening. It started happening almost at the time that we presented the overall report. Task forces of the GEF would go and work on a certain specific technical issue and would use these technical documents. So what kind of approach do you use for an overall comprehensive evaluation? For us, we've always worked from the perspective of we need to use a theory-based approach. We need to think through how the GEF is meant to achieve impact or how to achieve whatever it sets out to achieve. Sometimes this is not really impact, it's capacity building, for example. And we also very certain that we need mixed methods to address the various questions. Because we have evidence from many levels, community level, project, program, country, regional, global. So you get a difficulty in triangulating and mixing the methods and identifying what can be used where. So some of the methods and tools are focused on causal pathways, others on processes or analysis of trends. And this meant that for the GEF Independent Evaluation Office, methodology development became very important and an ongoing concern. New questions require new tools and methods to answer. The evidence basis of the fifth overall performance study is then quite impressive. 33 evaluations and studies undertaken by GEF-IEO since OPS4 were used. It has led to 21 technical documents, several additional studies, and the full GEF portfolio of 3,566 projects from the pilot phase through to September 30, 2013, sorry, I'm adding a year there, were taken into account. So we have outcome evidence on 491 completed projects and design and implementation evidence on a number of other projects approved since the close of OPS4, and field evidence from 54 countries. So this is, again, a mountain of evidence. And we've grouped this evidence in 3 levels. So you have main conclusions and recommendations, overarching findings and overarching recommendations, and there are only 3 of them. So this is really addressed to the replenishment. And then there are specific recommendations that can also be taken into account or can become the subject of further work. And there are 6 substantive chapters in the full report with 46 specific recommendations, and there you see it. That is no longer possible for the replenishment negotiations to deal with. They basically can give orders to the GEF. You take this into account in the next phase when you start develop this specific subjects. And the 21 technical documents are available on the website, and as I said, are currently already in several instances in use for further development of policies. So this mountain of evidence is really pointing to the fact that if you do a comprehensive evaluation like this, you need to build in ways that the evidence will remain available. And this was what we've done with the technical documents. So the overall judgment that we had, first of all, on relevance. We went through the criteria of the evaluations of the DAC evaluation network, and those criteria in use in the multilaterals as well. And we concluded that to the extent that its overall funding level permits this, the GEF is relevant to the conventions and to regional and national priorities. So on relevance, we came up with a very positive assessment and judgment. And if we look then at efficiency, we said no, the GEF is not really efficient. It's a network organization. There are lots of difficulties involved in a network organization. The operation of a network organization is way more difficult than if you have one organization where you have internal hierarchies that can quickly send out a command to the network. So due also to networking arrangements that have become too complex and a focus on approval of projects rather than programs, and an overburdened results-based management system in the GEF, we said no, on efficiency you really do have a problem. On effectiveness, the overall judgment is very positive. This sounds like a kind of a paradox. How can an inefficient organization be effective? Well, it just costs more money, and it takes a bit more time. So, but it can be very effective. And this is the kind of an interesting finding where, indeed, the replenishment and the stakeholders in the GEF need to decide, is it worth our while? Are we justified in spending this extra money and time in order to get this high level of effectiveness? But 80% of satisfactory outcomes is a good result. On sustainability and progress towards impact, we actually come up with a very positive assessment as well. This was yesterday presented to you by Andrew Steer in a negative perspective. Andrew Steer actually focused not on the fact that only 7% of the activities don't have progress towards impact, but on the fact that only 15% of these activities achieve system-level impact. And he said this has to be way more. And we felt that we should pay attention to the other side of the coin, which is that it's only 7% of the activities that does not show any possibility of progressing towards impact. Impact is always a long-term issue in the GEF. And system-level impact is very difficult to achieve in any case. 15% is actually a very high percentage. We can go into that in the discussions, but for example, if you take a company like Apple, most of the products that they work on will never reach the market, and but they make sure that the few that reach the market then change the market. So this is the kind of in the R&D community, it's well known that you throw away a lot of money because you have a few winners. And if the GEF has 15% winners, it's quite astounding, actually. So it's nevertheless not enough. So we'll get to that. So our overall conclusion was the GEF is achieving its mandate and objectives. So please, yes, you can go ahead. Another phase of 4 years, do it. So now let us unpack this issue of impact. This is the most interesting conclusion I feel from the report, the work that we've done on impact. And the interesting point is, as I said, in contrast to what Andrew Steer said yesterday, the impact has consistently been higher than expected. I mean, we go up from low efficiency to satisfactory outputs and good outcomes, and then promising progress towards impact. How is this all possible? The secret lies in the catalytic role of the GEF, which was really explored in the 4th overall performance study. But this time we looked at the pathways towards impact and went more into depth and explored them. And we see that other actors are joining what the GEF is doing and supporting, and it's in fact these other actors that are taking over that lead to the promising avenues, the promising pathways to impact. So the catalytic role, as I said, was first explored in OPS4, and we found then 3 categories of activities: foundational support through enabling activities that created the environment in which action can be taken, then demonstration of solutions, of new technologies, of approaches that would potentially solve the problems, and then at a certain moment investment in large-scale introduction of these solutions that have proven to work. And this investment issues, this upscaling, was really the focus of the impact work in the 5th overall performance study. So if you look at this and unpack this broader adoption, we found that there are actually 5 different mechanisms of broader adoption that we can classify, that we can identify, that we can look at the evaluative evidence on how they are performing. So we see sustaining. Things that are started will be sustained. Replication. Things are replicated elsewhere and in this way increase. There's mainstreaming, where additional elements start playing a role. And there's upscaling, where new elements come in. And there's market change and market transformation. And the way that I've already said this and classified it, you see that it will go up. Levels of impact go up when you go down. So if you do sustaining, it's nice, but it's really not that impressive. If you go down, replication, mainstreaming, upscaling, and market change and transformation, you get to the system level achievements. And this we found to be very useful because in general, project proponents are not really aware of these mechanisms. And they can be inspired by this. They can ensure that in the project design that they have, they take up these elements. So let us show a video on this. They will help us. Yes.
Big, how we achieve greater impact. The Global Environment Facility provides funds to help countries protect the global environment. But compared to how big the world's environmental problems are, the funds that GEF provides are very small. Luckily, the GEF doesn't work alone. The funding that the GEF provides is just part of the story. It works hand in hand with partners such as governments, the private sector, civil society, communities, and other partners, all of which have the bigger role of expanding and building on the projects the GEF has funded. Then we start to see a larger impact on a global scale. Take climate change, for example. All over the world, carbon dioxide emissions are increasing. Life-threatening weather events like heat waves and flooding are affecting everyone. So what can we do about it? A solution? Light bulbs. Energy-efficient light bulbs, to be exact. Just replacing a single 60-watt incandescent bulb with a 9-watt LED reduces the required energy by 85%. That means lower carbon dioxide emissions. Now, one light bulb won't change the world, but what if we could change lots of light bulbs? What if every single person on the planet switched to LEDs? Challenging? Yes, but definitely not impossible. Here are several ways that GEF partners can make this happen. These can occur at the same time or in any order. One way to larger impact is for interventions originally supported by the GEF being continued by partners without GEF support, so they keep the positive environmental benefits going. Let's say the GEF works with the local government to introduce energy-efficient light bulbs in a city. To make sure everyone in the city knows how good these light bulbs are for the environment, an awareness-raising campaign is also started. The GEF project also helps formulate regulations to phase out the old kind of light bulbs so that light bulb companies will start selling the new kind. After a few years, the local government sees a large decrease in the city's energy use. So even without GEF funding, they decide to fund a program to make sure the new light bulbs are used everywhere in the city, and they officially adopt the regulations that the GEF project helped to formulate. A second way, often called replication, is when a GEF intervention is copied elsewhere at a comparable scale. Say the local governments of 3 cities neighboring the original city in our example hear about what's happening and want to reduce their energy use too. They visit and learn how the first city did it. They also start to introduce the energy-efficient light bulbs, launch awareness-raising campaigns in their own cities, and implement regulations to ban the old kind the same way the first city did it. A third way is when a GEF-supported initiative is implemented at a larger scale, expanded to include more political, administrative, economic, or ecological components. The national government hears how energy consumption has decreased dramatically in a part of the country where not just 1, but 4 cities have started to introduce energy-efficient light bulbs. It decides to do the same thing, but for the entire country. It also launches an awareness campaign, this time at the national level, and passes a law that reduces taxes for all private companies that sell energy-efficient light bulbs. To further reduce carbon emissions, the national government also puts more funds into building renewable energy power plants. A fourth way to achieve greater impact is for the information, lessons, or specific aspects of a GEF initiative to become part of partners' own initiatives. The success of the energy-efficient light bulb project in reducing energy use is now well known, and other partners decide to use some ideas and lessons from the project in their own environmental projects as well. Some civil society organizations design awareness-raising campaigns the same way the original GEF project did. Other donors decide to use the regulations the GEF project helped formulate in their projects in other countries around the world. A fifth way to make a larger impact is through market change, when economic demand and supply shift to more environment-friendly products and services. Because people are becoming aware of how good the energy-efficient light bulbs are for the environment, they keep buying more and more of these light bulbs from the stores. Private companies see that it is better for their business to invest in this kind of technology and start selling only the new kind of light bulbs. GEF projects contribute to change, but for larger impact to occur, GEF partners do a lot more. It's through all these ways, when interventions are continued by partners without GEF support, when they are copied at a comparable scale in other locations, when they are implemented at a larger scale, when lessons or specific aspects of a GEF initiative become part of partners' own initiatives, and when demand and supply shift to more environmentally friendly products, that GEF partners can move from light bulbs in a single city to light bulbs in countries all over the world. And when enough people use these energy-efficient light bulbs for long enough, the CO2 emissions will go down. Hopefully, all the devastating heat waves and floods will disappear too. Of course, energy-efficient light bulbs are just one example. The same kinds of action toward larger impact need to be taken for protected areas, water treatment plants, cleaner factories, and the many other initiatives that the GEF funds. Global environmental benefits may seem like a big goal, but with GEF funding and all partners working together, making the world a better place is not so hard to do. For more information on how the GEF is achieving impact, see the fifth overall performance study at www.thegef.org/GEF/OPS5.
Okay, so let's return to yesterday, Andrew Steer actually challenged us as evaluators also to become communicators. So we try to do this also to make sure that the concepts were clear. Because if they are on paper, you have to read them through, and it's basically boring. And you have to understand how this operates. And I find actually that the video really shows you that it's not 4 separate or 5 separate mechanisms, but there is a kind of an order in them as well. And if you go for the fifth, which has the highest impact, you still need to go through some of the earlier ones as well. They need to be included. So it helps thinking through how you can actually increase your impact. And we hope that material like this, plus of course the tables of outcomes and outputs and impact and etc. that we have in the report, the evidence, the numbers also are convincing to take up use. We find that the added value of the GEF is very much in this kind of a collaboration with other actors, supporting a government, setting up market change, trying to influence what local government is doing, and so on. And this is what is the reason why you would say, okay, I'm accepting some lower efficiency. It's actually an instrument to get other actors to act. So we believe that this should help. Now, let me go through the 3 main conclusions and recommendations. Our first conclusion was that the global environmental trends continue to decline, and we've had the IPCC report this weekend, so you know all about it, and Andrew Steer again put emphasis on this yesterday. But we link it, of course, to the GEF. In the case of the GEF is one of the instruments that the world community has to change this, but the replenishment has not provided an increase in purchasing power. So even while things are going worse, this is a kind of a warning signal. Do something else then, at least. Don't think that the GEF would be able to stem the tide of worsening environmental trends. And our recommendation was that resource mobilization also of other actors, needs to continue and increase to reflect the urgency of global environmental problems. Now, we also felt that we should illustrate, again, communication, that the business model of the GEF is no longer appropriate and leads to growing inefficiency. So if we think that the GEF is a truck delivering a package to a government, for example, it's very slow. And we would want to have a quick delivery, also given the urgency of the problem. So we would want it to be very quick rather than slow. So again, we try to communicate this. We have lots of evidence on this. There's one issue that I wanted to show you here, which is methodologically interesting. It's about the difficulties in a network organization if you increase the network. This is the network of the GEF when it started. You have all the countries there, you have the agencies, you have the council. This is too small, of course, to see the details, but you see that these are the actors in the GEF when it started. This is the GEF as it is currently taking shape. And we say this is difficult. Here you have to take decisions on how you actually manage the network, who is communicating to who is acting with who, etc. Otherwise, this network will take up even more time, and the efficiency of the GEF will go down further. So this is a kind of where we used methodology, social network analysis, to identify where the problems are in communication in the GEF. Our third conclusion was that the interventions supported by the GEF are catalytic and successful in achieving impact over time. But we then say that to maximize results, the intervention model of the GEF needs to be applied where it is most needed and supported by a better business model. So the support itself needs to, the package needs to arrive earlier, and it needs to open up into something beautiful. So how can we increase impact in the GEF? We have recommendations in the 5th overall performance study on the successful mechanisms for broader adoptions. They were identified by our impact team. They were further developed in the 5th overall performance study. We have evidence on engagement with civil society organizations, how that increases impact. There is evidence that the GEF can actually build on the success of its small grant program, because the small grants program is a kind of a laboratory for solutions at the community level, and it's actually promoting this. And these solutions can then be taken up at higher scales. Engagement with the private sector. The example of incandescent light bulbs changed for LED bulbs is a very good example of collaboration with the private sector ensuring that there is sufficient supply for the market and helping and supporting this changeover in the market. Ensure gender mainstreaming. It's also an important issue, especially when we talk about livelihoods at the local level. We have a strategic role for science and technology in the GEF because of the innovations that are needed. And we need to ensure that lessons learning through knowledge brokerage and M&E take place. So these are the sets of recommendations that we give on impact. And this leads to the last video, where you'll get the overview again, but now this time as communicators, we try to bring this to you.
I'm Naoko Ishii. As a CEO of the GEF, I welcome the OPS 5 conducted by Independent Evaluation Office.
The fifth overall performance study provides insight into what the GEF is doing well and what it can improve.
OPS 5 is building on what we have done in previous overall performance studies. And as a result, it becomes even stronger in presenting the results. It's really at the pinnacle of a pyramid of evaluations, of 33 evaluations and 26 sub-studies that have all gone into providing this overall picture of what the achievements of the GEF are.
The OPS 5 report makes 3 overarching conclusions and provides recommendations for addressing each conclusion. The report points out that global environmental trends continue to decline. In the face of environmental decline, the strategic choices need to reflect the urgency of environmental problems.
Noting that environmental trends are going down, what can we do? And we believe that the GEF needs to make some strategic choices of where it wants to move forward to have the greatest impact.
The OPS 5 report also found that the business model of the GEF is outdated. It's too complicated and inefficient to properly address the need. The project cycle is too slow, and the GEF network is complex and overburdened. There is an increasing number of partners in the network. It is no longer as efficient as it could be.
The major trade-off that GEF would consider is how to balance information needs, the level of preparation that's required in the projects with the need to speed up the project cycle. GEF needs to retain the elements that are critical for project preparation, but at the same time, it needs to give up on information needs that are not as essential.
There are several recommendations that can be made to improve the business model, identify better what the key businesses that you need to address in the coming years. How can you come to faster decisions about this? How can you spend the money faster? How can you change the GEF from a project-oriented organization towards a more program-oriented organization, go to higher levels of impact on systems?
OPS 5 found that the GEF support does work. Over time, it is successful in achieving impact, not just nationally, but also regionally and globally. More than 80% of the GEF projects show at least satisfactory outcomes, and only 7% show no progress toward impact.
GEF helps by making things happen quicker, by building quality standards, by building country capacities to continue the work, by introducing new approaches. But these processes will grow and multiply only if the stakeholders are engaged.
The interesting thing about this progress towards impact is that we have identified ways in which to improve it. So it's not just that we know that this progress towards impact is happening, we also know how to increase its effectiveness and how to make this happen faster over time.
OPS 5 offers other important findings.
When it comes to relevance, OPS 5 found that overall the GEF has been responsive to convention guidance. We did find that there were some exceptions where it was very difficult for the GEF to implement guidance due to things like repetitive language, lack of prioritization in convention.
Overall performance studies in the GEF are quite challenging, but we managed to work as a team, and as a matter of fact, that was one of the ingredients for the success.
With few exceptions, the GEF has been doing meaningful and consistently interesting and really groundbreaking work. There's always more to discuss with the entities themselves, with some private sector players and some civil society actors, and bring some of those stories to life.
OPS 5 is very much in the lines of the movement of the Secretariat and other members of the GEF network to become more strategic and to focus on issues that are critical, focusing on what will happen at the end of the project, and how can GEF be an agent of transformation.
For a major effort like OPS 5, of course, we have involved many people, both in the office and outside, and I would like to thank all of them for their energy and enthusiasm. And, of course, I would also like to thank all our stakeholders who have interacted with us on this study.
OPS 5 generated rich and timely information and analysis, which greatly helped GEF Council members as well as participants of the replenishment to think through what kind of strategies and programs we should have for the next 4 years and beyond.
Okay, well, I think we want to thank Rob, and especially ending on that lovely note. What a beautiful video. Really, really nice. Makes me want to go get in an airplane. So I think we'll open up, yes. We'll open up the floor for questions. Let me start, since I have the chair. I have one question for you, which I'm curious on your 80% effectiveness finding, on what evidence base you relied. Specifically, did you rely on the self-evaluations or validated evaluations of the individual entities that are actually implementing these projects, or did you actually look beyond that to look at effectiveness yourself?
We do depend on self-evaluations first. They are then validated by the independent evaluation offices of the agencies, or they are undertaken by the... so we have a mixture of self-evaluations and independent evaluations at the project level. And we have agreement with the agencies on how these should be rated. So the rating system is an agreed-upon rating system. And they are then validated by us. So there is a performance group in the office that looks at whether the assessments are correct or not and poses questions if necessary. So it's not just that this is our assessment, but it's the assessment of the evaluation offices of the GEF agencies as well, including your office, Cheryl. So we also listen to you on, and we have agreement, especially the bulk of the activities is still with the World Bank, UNDP, and the UN Environmental Programme. And so with them we have a kind of historical, we really have discussions also about the validity of these assessments, and it came out remarkably consistent. So this is not just a GEF assessment, it's actually an assessment, a joint assessment of GEF with the GEF agencies.
Thank you. Let me open the floor for questions, comments. Just say your name and where you're from, please.
University Corporation for Atmospheric Research. So very good presentation. I guess my first question has to do with strategic planning. I don't recall that you mentioned it, but does the GEF have a strategic plan? And to what extent was the evaluation charged with measuring progress against the goals and objectives that were identified in the plan? My second question has to do with the level of resources that were used to conduct the evaluation. Can you say more about the amount of funding that was provided, the time frame for doing the evaluation, and the number of FTEs or full-time equivalents who actually engaged in the study? And my last question has to do with cost effectiveness. Did you look at that? You talked about effectiveness, but not cost effectiveness. So to what extent did you look at the actual cost for achieving outcomes?
Okay, to take the last first, cost effectiveness. Cost effectiveness is always a difficult issue because you really need to be able to compare and benchmark activities in order to proclaim whether they are cost effective or not. And we've been able to do some research, especially on reduction of GHG emissions. And the conclusions were not shocking or interesting enough to put them up in front of the video or something. So you communicate about the most outstanding issues. But in general, we found that the GEF is about as cost effective as many of the other instruments. For example, the carbon sequestration projects of joint implementation are one of the comparisons that we can make, and they're more or less at the same level of cost effectiveness. What we found earlier was that at the moment, energy efficiency in general of the traditional sector is definitely more cost effective if you reform the energy policies of countries. If you go to renewable energy, it's less cost efficient. And this is, of course, it's also understandable. It's not a reason to stop renewable energy. It's just a metric by which you know that you haven't yet achieved the point where you can tip the market, so to say. So there are interesting findings, and there is a technical document on this in OPS5 website. Overall cost of the fifth performance study, we've made it very difficult for you to find out. Because basically we said we integrate what the fifth overall performance study is doing with the rest of the GEF Independent Evaluation Office budget. So there is now an overall budget for a period of 4 years, and we basically say everything is happening to make this possible. But of course the various evaluations that are decided per every year that regularly take place, they are in the budget as well, and they have their own. So it becomes more difficult. What it shows also, this integration, the previous overall performance studies actually were to the tune of 2 million per study. And we managed to reduce the additional work that we needed to do to make OPS5 possible to below 1 million. So again, I don't think this is an achievement that we should be proud of. It's just that the costs are now incorporated in the regular program. And we think it should be, actually, it should be. We had a huge team of people working on this, about 50 FTEs, I think, at the end, or if you, at certain moments in time, and many of them local. So if we had parts of the study taking place in Brazil, then a Brazilian team would take care of this. So that's another issue. And, the strategic planning. The GEF has always had difficulty to plan strategically. So there is no strategic planning in the sense of we identify how much money a country gets and then what we want to achieve in the country. This is changing now, and the GEF is becoming more strategic in its planning at country level. For the global programs, there is some strategic planning, but it tends to be kind of a wish list of the conventions. We want the GEF to pay attention to this, spend so much money on it, which is not strategic planning really. Strategic planning really has to do with how you want to achieve certain objectives. Now, at the country level, the interesting thing that is developing in the GEF is that the GEF is now starting to engage with countries to have this kind of strategic planning. And it's the country then that should do the strategic planning. But the Secretariat of the GEF wants to help and support countries in achieving this. And they're focusing first on the big recipients of money of the GEF. And we'll then move on later to other countries in the system.
You know we had some other people. Here we go.
Veronica González Díaz from the Inter-American Development Bank. 2 years ago, we did a similar evaluation of the Multilateral Investment Fund that have this, like, kind of a similar objectives of replication and scale it up. At that evaluation, we found that in order to scale up, you have to have a scale-up strategy from the beginning of the project, so you have to have it incorporated in the design, and you also have to identify the potential scalers in the countries, and that was, at least in our assessment, what make the project more effective. So I don't know if you have looked into that, and then the designs of the project have changed if your objective is scaling up. And also I have a comment about your video. I think it was a very interesting video, but I missed the voice of your partners. Thank you.
Yeah. No, the last point is, of course, correct, but then it would have become twice as long. I would say the movie version definitely needs to have the voice of the partners. But this video was also a bit meant for the council to really focus on the findings of the report. The issue of incorporating, thinking about upscaling and etc. at the design phase of the project, yes, fully agree. This is actually something that we found as well, where we if you go into the details of if you go into the technical document on impact, you will see a full development of this. What is the evidence that projects that have incorporated this in early design and are achieving progress better? There's huge evidence for this. And Aron Zazueta, the Chief Evaluation Officer of the GEF, can give you way more details about this and has the full evidence available for all of this. And it's very encouraging, by the way. I think this is something that we want people to pick up and work on.
Hi, I'm Patty Hill with Agility International Development, formerly known as IRG. I am an M&E manager there, and as an M&E professional, I was struck by the 5 mechanisms that you discussed for impact. And my question is both personal and professional for me then. What do you see as the responsibility and how much should be budgeted, both time-wise and financially, in M&E, monitoring and evaluation, for going beyond a focus on evidence and data to looking at communication, facilitating learning, and really looking at those market changes that are needed?
That's a very tough question. One of the problems that we're often facing, and a problem that we noted in the GEF, I mentioned that the results-based management system of the GEF is overburdened because everybody wants to put their subject in and wants to know how the GEF is proceeding towards this, etc., etc. And so you get a situation where demands for more money for M&E quickly can rise out of hand. And we found that monitoring and evaluation in GEF had actually gone down in quality because of the fact that there were too many demands on the system. And so project proponents had to decide for themselves and choose out of the huge burden of indicators that they were supposed to report on. And so it is really an issue where the M&E officer, you in this case, needs to engage with stakeholders on what are the crucial issues that we can actually report on, and how can we keep this to a level that is a burden that is acceptable in the. So it's more an issue of negotiation and good sense, and taking guided decisions through interactions with stakeholders, than that there is a kind of a general rule thou shalt spend 5% of your budget on M&E. In some cases in the GEF, we've seen huge budgets for M&E because there was a lack of data, and they needed to set up databases to start working from. In other cases, it is considerably lower. So it's a question of negotiation and design that needs to be thought through carefully.
I'm Peter Kern at the University of Montana. I see a challenging dilemma in the presentation you gave to us, and I wanted to know how you might respond to this. On the one hand, there's a lot of emphasis on the catalytic role of the GEF and the importance of partners and small projects and working through partners. And on the other hand, one of the great inefficiencies is that there's so many partners and too many partners to deal with. So how do you resolve that?
The problem of inefficiency is not so much on the ground when activities take place, but it's in getting to the ground. So in order to have the catalytic role, you need to start up activities in a country, in a region, or in an ecosystem. You need to get the other actors involved. They need to bring the money together. They need to start doing the work. And they need to commit their own resources as well, which governments, by the way, do spectacularly. The governments outspend the GEF in general. Once that is started, then this process starts to have its own dynamic. The inefficiencies that we noted were in getting there, in getting an agreement on what should be done and who should then be involved from the GEF side. So, for example, if you have 10 GEF agencies, which is right now the case, you get these issues of which one would be the best to support this activity. And there could be fights over this. Very civil, of course. We are talking about public servants here. But fights in the sense of, this is our project, we developed this, or we are the best to undertake this. So the inefficiencies are up front. And once you get on the ground, these processes, there can be all kinds of inefficiencies as well, but those were not the inefficiencies that we were asking attention for.
I was actually wanting to follow up on that same question on the inefficiencies. And I wondered how much of it was coming from the GEF itself and how much was coming from the constituent agencies that you work through. There's always calls for faster, cheaper, faster. But of course, many of the things that are required are things that make some sense, like safeguards and procurement rules and designing M&E up front and doing baselines and things that do take some time and some expense. Perhaps there's better ways to get efficiencies out of those as well. But I was wondering how much is part of the, say, the World Bank or IDB's normal processes of project preparation, and how much is coming from the add-on that the GEF does up front?
I think there are, we identify a series of factors that cause these inefficiencies. And let me just highlight one of them as something that is happening in the global system, which impacts on the GEF as well. So to show that it's not just, it's not often not conscious decisions that do this, but circumstances that happen. In almost all of the boards or governing bodies of the GEF agencies, there is a move towards cost recovery. If, as an agency, we are engaging with, for example, the GEF, we need to have sufficient money to do this, and we cannot subsidize the GEF, so we need to start indeed saying our procurement system is there to help get the best activity on the ground. But if you use our procurement system, it's going to cost you money, because these people, I mean, we have people there in offices that need to be paid, and their salaries need to be paid. So our project fee needs to be this. So you get negotiations about how much money the GEF needs to give agencies to do this work. And you get these kind of, this dynamic is then happening. At the same time, of course, the same thing is more or less happening in the GEF Council. In the GEF Council says, we should pay less to these agencies. I mean, why are we spending huge fees on agencies to get the money to the... let's give it directly to countries. But then you bring up a host of other problems. So these efficiency issues are often not conscious decisions or it's not just the GEF that creates these problems. It's actually some trends in international cooperation where everybody wants the costs to go down, but then if the costs go down for everybody, then who is actually still able to do the work that needs to be done? So it's difficult. It's not easy to answer this. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah, thank you very much. Really enjoyed the presentation, particularly the emphasis on being able to communicate, some of these concepts to a broader audience. My name is Nalini Tarakeshwar from the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, charity based in London. A couple of questions. So one is there something that you learned about in terms of a failure? So something, so because it's very easy often to talk about what you should do more of and what we're doing well. But really, what was it that you learned as one big thing that you should stop doing, and that's what you would do, what you would not do in the coming future? Sort of the other question was, you talked about innovation, and was quite struck by the fact that, as you think about overarching evaluations, it led to sort of innovations in methodology. But it would be good to hear, is there innovation just in technology or in science, or is it really an innovation in methodology that you sort of learned?
Okay. On the first one, yes, the mirror image of the successes is, of course, the failure. And we have some examples in the Global Environment Facility of things that were really tackled the wrong way. For example, solar energy in rural areas in Africa. At a certain moment, the GEF stopped investing in that. We basically stopped being involved. Not because solar energy in rural areas is not a good idea, but because they knew that what they've done so far was dramatically faulty. I mean, the basic problem was that they were not capable of doing market research in a real rigorous way, a robust way. So they misunderstood local markets, and as a result, delivered products that were then, for example, captured by the elite in a village, and the energy did not benefit the poorer people, and there were all kinds of problems also with maintenance. The wrong products were delivered. And so they thought at a certain moment there was a kind of a universal decision then in the GEF, okay, we're not doing this well, we're not the right people to do this, let's drop it. We'll just stop doing this. And more recently, they've started very gradually to build it up again. Okay, what are the ingredients that we need to do this? And do we have the right partners? And can we then go back into this? But that kind of decision is an example of how the GEF tackles failures. The interesting thing is that, again, the number of failures isn't that big in the GEF. And there is actually an answer for this. The reason why the failures are relatively so low is because the technologies that are being introduced and the innovations that are being introduced are really new in the circumstances in which they are being introduced, but we know about them. They are well-established technologies. So some of the spectacular successes of the GEF were with technologies that were new in local circumstances, but they were not to be developed still. We knew what they would do. So was quite, and it's indeed then both technologies that are being introduced and ways of doing business. So the innovative livelihoods, new ways of earning a living.
Good morning. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I'm Dorte Werner from the Evaluation Department in the Inter-American Development Bank. I have 2 questions. And you talked about the failures. I would like to learn if there's anything that the projects that really worked, do they have something in common? And particularly, I'm interested in knowing if the self-standing GEF projects have stronger results than the ones that are linked to bigger projects. For example, as you mentioned, the UN and the World Bank, if they're linked to a big project. And then I'm also interested in hearing a little bit about the Regional Development Bank. You mentioned the World Bank and the UN. The Regional Development Bank, what's the story with them? I know IDB have probably not been recently one of the biggest takers of the GEF. And where do you see in terms of the Green Climate Fund? Are you going to be trying to get funds from the Green Funds too, or work with the Green Climate Fund? Where does that stand? Thank you.
Oh, those are a series of questions, actually. Which, maybe first to go into the last one, the Green Climate Fund. If the Green Climate Fund is going to take off quite quickly, it would mean potentially that the GEF would become a more specialized agency in climate change, focus on, for example, the linkages of climate change with biodiversity loss or chemicals pollution or natural resources management in a sustainable way. So basically follow the holistic model of we need to integrate climate into other aspects. And the GEF would, especially on the environmental side, be very well poised to do that. But it would be a lower level of investment. Because let us not forget that biodiversity loss, which is a major crisis as well in the world, is at the moment only, let's say, funded. The fight against this is funded through the GEF mainly, and through the big environmental NGOs like Conservation International. Many of the multilaterals and the UN are not really aware of the loss of biodiversity and don't take appropriate action at the moment. So the GEF is the big funder in this regard. And the same for chemicals, except for the Montreal Protocol. Almost everything that happens in the world on global chemical issues is being supported by the GEF. So you will get a shift in funding. Now, the involvement of the banks in general, do we see any? The interesting, I've actually seen one interesting perspective in this that is not that complementary to the banks, actually, which is that the UN sometimes manages to outperform the banks, which is beyond, I mean, nobody expects this. I mean, the banks certainly always feel, oh, well, we know how to do development, and the UN, come on, they're only working on capacity building. They're not really serious. That they are victims of the political quagmire that the decision-making in these boards. This is not. You cannot compare this to our efficient boards and so on. But the action on the ground of the UN is sometimes spectacular. And the reason for that is not that the UN is spectacular, but that the countries that are doing this are spectacular. So we have one example of a project, and this is actually again on LED, on light bulbs. The GEF support in China has changed and transformed the light bulb market in China. And this was supported by UNDP, not by the banks. So, and it's one of the most spectacular successes of the GEF. But then, of course, we have to be realistic and say, no, it's a spectacular success of China. And China just, basically decided, in this case we want the UNDP to support us. And we'll use the money of the GEF as a startup of this, and then of course we'll drop tons of money in there from ourselves. And this is, by the way, money is maybe one of the deciding factors of larger scale impact. And there we see problems, of course, that especially, of course, the emerging economies have huge amounts of money and their banking system is actually looking for interesting opportunities to invest. And if you go to the least developed countries, then the banking system becomes a huge obstacle and it becomes problematic. And the GEF doesn't have an answer to this, but the banks also don't. These are potentially situations where injections of money could help get higher impact.
My name is Ramesh Deshpande. I'm former World Bank staff, but we have an informal organization called India Agricultural Group. The retired World Bank and IFC guys have come together, and this is a voluntary work we do. I have a question. First of all, thank you very much for a great presentation. It was excellent. I think you have a really independent evaluation group in GEF, because it is not very easy to say that our GEF model is out of date. We have seen so many independent evaluation groups, but they generally toe the line of the management of the institutions, and they are not as independent as you have been. So thank you for that. But taking that clue that GEF model is out of date, where do we go from here now? There are several successful models used by Silicon Valley. For example, they say this Facebook and Google and all that. So one venture capital company said, we have an application factory. Whoever has a good idea, you come with that idea and we'll give you $250,000 to start with as a venture capital and see. And there was excellent ideas coming in from people. Do you think this kind of approach, first of all, as you said, that GEF doesn't have yet country-specific strategy. So I was wondering that if GEF is working with these big development banks, World Bank has 180 field offices, so also IFC and Asian Development Bank is. How are we using these development banks in promoting environmental issues? I think it's not coming out very strongly. And probably that one reason why GEF doesn't have its own adequate organization to deal with this, deal with the programs coming in from these banks. Because if GEF can link with country strategy work with the World Bank and ADB, that will take dialogue straight away with very high levels in the government. That's one. The second one was about the cost recovery. I think GEF can do funding only to an extent, because the job is too big to achieve. And therefore, there has to be some structured policy about how GEF can do cost recovery model. And creating a market for projects, in the sense that if you invite projects from different countries, different institutions, and you rank them, and they say, okay, these are the projects, they fit in our strategy, and in these country strategies, this is what we are going to take, instead of going around and searching the projects. So create a market for projects. That is another way. If GEF is thinking of restructuring its work model, working on a market principles, maybe one idea to go with. Thank you.
Thank you. I think many of your comments are important for the evaluation office to take in mind when following this up and going further. The interesting and the beautiful thing I think about a comprehensive evaluation like we've done is that you can actually match the business model to the impacts that you want to achieve, that you basically are bringing this together in one evaluation. So you are focusing on what is actually needed in the business model or in the way that you do business or that you operate to be able to achieve these impacts. And this is the concern that we raised.
I think we have time for one or at most two short questions, please, and then we'll close at 10:30. I think we have this side first.
Lady first, please.
She was there first, and then we'll get to you.
Thank you. My name is Irene Karani from LTS International, based in Edinburgh and Nairobi, Kenya. I'm from the Kenyan office. We do a lot of global, regional, and national evaluations. And thank you very much for your very enlightening presentation. My question is on the recommendations for the GEF, one which was enhancing gender mainstreaming. Now, I would like to understand, gender mainstreaming has been around. We always say, when we do evaluations, we always tell people to enhance gender mainstreaming for better impacts. But we find that a lot of the partners or the agencies they actually don't know how to enhance gender mainstreaming. So I'd like to understand, is it in the design phase from the programs that you evaluated? Where was the weakness? Is it in the design phase, in the implementation phase, or in collecting the gender disaggregated data after the projects were completed? Thank you.
Gentleman's question, and then I'll ask you to.
Thank you so much. I think with this presentation, Robs, you mark maybe the global figures of GEF, global environmental facilities in the world. But my name is Serge Eric Yaku. I'm a consultant. I'm an evaluator. I'm currently working on 3 evaluations in Africa. And then I'm also the former president of African Evaluation Associations. So, Rob, if I have to go back now, with other colleagues, with one main lesson, looking at the dynamism of GEF with regard to the 3 main fields we are working on: adaptations, mitigation, and policy. Which ones you may grade to say that it's working very well, and which strategy do you have to take to tackle or to improve the least one? Thanks so much.